I'm not sure if there's many Rhema listeners who are fans of Graham Norton. I must say I'm a big fan. Funny guy, great guests. What is there not to love? Somebody who is, well, a fan of some measure is Maryanne Spurdle from Maxim Institute. She joins us on the program now. Kia ora, good morning.
Morning, Andrew.
Graham Norton, a wonderful chat show host, and certainly has some fantastic guests. There's something which he does at the end of his show, though. It's become a bit of a staple. And as I mentioned beforehand, Kiwis tend to do well in this part of the show. The big red chair. Talk with us about the big red chair, because it's kind of a metaphor for our society at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah. It got me thinking about the big red chair when I was reading something that irritated me. That's the column this week. So if anybody hasn't seen it, what he does at the very end of the show is a random audience member gets selected to sit in this oversized recliner, and then he watches them on screen, and the other guests watch as they try to tell the most entertaining story ever in about a minute. Mm-hmm. And he's got this lever that he's just hovering over. And if he decides, this story isn't going well, or they say something he just thinks it's done, or he just looks bored, he'll yank the lever, and in the middle of their story, their feet get flipped over their head, and that's it. They're out, and the next person gets to try. Yeah,
I mean, it is a bunch of fun. I think people enter into that in the spirit of, hey, I'm probably going to get flipped with my legs in the air on live television.
Second.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's all done in the best possible taste. But I think it's a good metaphor of how if something in our society offends us or is boring or doesn't fit our mold or doesn't go along the lines of a certain ideology, we're quite happy to grab that lever, aren't we?
Yeah, you're kind of conditioned to do that now. There's some people who you just go, no, you're not to listen to them. Shut it down. And so, yeah, we've got a short attention span for anything that is, controversial or against the mainstream. If the majority doesn't agree, then we just shut it down.
Do you think that's because of our, I don't want to have another conversation which blames social media, although maybe that is part of it here, that we've just got such short attention spans. If we're not entertained, if it doesn't push our buttons, if it doesn't fit within our silo of groupthink, then we pull the lever, that we no longer have any space in our lives for something which isn't entertaining or stimulating or taking us in the direction we want to go.
Yeah, and we, because of the short attention span, if something involves too much thought, then we don't like going there. We need these shortcuts into, what is true, what isn't. Authority says that, okay, it must be true, I'll go with it. This is what media is saying is true. I'm not going to investigate any further. I'll go with it.
And so then
you've got, or what's that?
Or the reverse of that. Oh, the mainstream media says this is true. Obviously, that's false.
It must not be.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I was going to say, so now we've got alternative media, where people who are immediately going to discount something because it's mainstream are tuning into their own platforms. And on both sides of the matter, I brought up The Coddling of the American Mind before. One of those authors has co-authored a book called The Counseling of the American Mind, which I'm partway through. And they point out that this isn't just one side of the political spectrum. People on both sides are practicing ways of shutting down ideas, halfway into the thought, because no, that doesn't fit our narrative. So we just shut it down. Instead of following the story through, listening to see if there's anything you can learn, and then countering anything you see that isn't true.
Yeah,
which is kind of the more sensible way to go about it.
That's debate and reason and all of those thoroughly sensible things that we seem to be losing the art of. Interested though, Maryanne, of what particular story, what news article made you think of Graham Norton's Big Red Chair?
Yeah, I kind of followed this lead. There was a recent profile by the New York Times on Barry Weiss, who she used to be a New York Times reporter. I was only vaguely aware of her. I think her resignation letter crossed my eyes a few years back, and It turns out she started up her own alternative platform. Before she did that, she interviewed some high-profile people who had kind of run afoul of their own allies by being willing to challenge those in their own camp, by being willing to say things against the mainstream. People who'd been right of center and left of center, who'd found themselves in this no man's land and were kind of collaborating together, interviewing each other on each other's platforms. And she wrote an extensive piece in 2018. Some of the names are familiar to me, some aren't. I still am not aware of all of what she was writing about. But I kind of followed that trail after reading the profile on her. And it was kind of a good little map of alternative media in the States.
Do you see this happening? I mean, yes, happening in the States, and there's lots of examples there. Do you see examples of this happening in New Zealand as well?
Yeah, because we've got alternative platforms now, and you've got plenty of people who will discount anything just because it's on. Interesting example here a few months ago. One of my pieces was kind of commissioned by One News, so it ended up on their platform.
Oh, yeah.
And the comments on Facebook, apparently I'm a vile lefty. Now, if you read the content of the column, you'd realize it was completely moderate. Yeah. And those people obviously didn't recognize that it was written by someone from a conservative think tank. Yeah. But they saw it on that platform, and they just assumed, without reading the content, that it was leftist propaganda. So that was kind of funny because I'd never been called a vile lefty before.
Wow. You can add that to the bingo card. So there we go. It ends up in a situation where we only talk to people that we agree with, that we only listen to information that we probably already know. How are we learning? How are we growing? How are we being challenged? How are we developing it all?
Exactly. That's the problem. I think.
Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, if we don't want to have to discount things because, and it kind of falls into two categories. Either the person is stupid, so don't listen to them, or they're evil, and you don't listen to bad people. Yeah. But if you're not willing to listen to their argument, then you're actually making yourself stupider because you're now lacking understanding that you could have if you just stopped to go, why do you think that?
After a few cycles, downward spirals, I should say, it becomes self-fulfilling, right? Don't listen to that person, they're stupid. Become stupid. That is a stupid-making mechanism, really.
Yeah.
I suppose, how do we reverse that? I mean, for all of it, there's so much information out there, and again, this is perhaps part of the problem. There's so many different points of view that in some ways it's easiest to pick a lane. It's easiest to go, hey, these are the sorts of things that I'm interested in. These are like-minded individuals that I may have something in common with. I mean, that's not a social media phenomenon. That's just human nature to an extent. But there is just so much out there. What do you recommend? Do we intentionally read an article by somebody that annoys us? I mean, how do we push the other way, Maryanne?
I do that, but I'm weird. I think two of the things that give me hope are when I see people being curious, asking questions, and that is always going to happen, and that does happen. Yeah. And the other is just people respecting each other, because I feel like people, if they're willing to discuss something they disagree with, I see that as a sign of respect. If they just want to nod and move on, then that's really not respectful, to not want to engage somebody and find out more about their ideas. So I think having that genuine care for people as people and going, I care about you as a person, I want to know more, even if it doesn't sound like something I'm going to get on board with. Yeah. So yeah, curiosity and genuine love and respect for people, I think are the things that will drive it in the right direction.
And I suppose the algorithms don't help here, because the moment you watch something, it says, oh, you like that kind of stuff, do you? And it becomes narrower and narrower and narrower. But you can swim against the tide in that regard. You can pick up a book by an author that you haven't heard of before. You can swim in another lane. I suppose intellectually you can get different thoughts on a topic from a wide variety of points of view, although it's harder and it's uncomfortable and it might make us cross. And who's got time for that, right?
Yeah, the online engagement, it kind of removes the humanity because we're dealing with each other in a digital space where it's very easy to discount somebody else's humanity. but it does give us a lot more scope for curiosity. We can learn things quite easily if we use, judgment.
Yeah, and hey, really love the metaphor of Graham Norton in the big red chair. Keep your hand off that lever. And if you'd like to hear more from left-wing extremists like Maryanne Spurdle, of course, you can find out more at the Maxim Institute's website. Now, this article going to be published later this week, I understand, but more available at maxim.org.nz. Maryanne, some wonderful food for thought. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Andrew. See ya.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.